If I am sending you on an operation or on a mission, and my implied intent is not valid for the situation, I better be damn sure to, Dave, let's debrief. When you're in charge, you have not just your commander's intent that you give verbally, but you also have an implied intent that is the nature of your very being. And I realized that so much of my commander's intent throughout my entire career was based on implied intent. By knowing me, you knew that this is what I would want.
I knew what you expected.
Yes. This actually happened at Echelon Front. And it was Jamie and Jen and Lynn and the rest of the team during a muster. And they were going incredibly psycho to test everything and make sure that the line was going to be through as quickly as possible, make sure that registrations would go through and make sure people weren't waiting in line, and make sure that the things that needed to be handed out were in the right place at the right time, and that everything was going to be perfect. And I never pulled them aside. I actually did it after. I did it during the debrief. I said, you know what? Jamie, you and your team realized. I never said to them, but here's the deal. I said to them after the fact, I said, listen, if this event is disorganized and people have to wait in line and people are confused about where they're going and there's no one to check them in, and if all those things happen and people are coming and paying money to a leadership event and we can't even execute the leadership event smoothly, I want my money back immediately. Yeah. Jamie never had to ask me, hey, should I hire an extra 2 people to make sure that the line, she didn't ask me that. The implied intent was this better be the best thing ever. On the battlefield, hey, when it came time for Leif to either close with and destroy the enemy or, maybe leave a situation to avoid contact, he knew, Seth knew, the guys knew what the implied intent was. Look, if there's bad guys and we have an opportunity to take the fight them, that's what we do. So there's an important part about implied intent. So do you see where I'm coming from? Do you have any commentary on that?
Yeah. What I was writing down, I was thinking is it lets me know what I should do without you ever telling me what to do, because I know you well enough as my leader, as my boss, as whatever. I know what you want, so I know what to do when you're not around to tell me. Yep. And I also don't need to go, hang on, let me call Jocko and see what he's thinking here. I don't have to do that when there's no time to do that.
Yep. Another good example was we were at desert warfare training in the beginning of our workup and tasking a bruiser, and guys, we had a night off, and normally guys, when they have a night off, they go drinking in town and have a good time, and they come back, and no one even asked me, because the implied intent was we're here to train. That's right. The most important thing in the world. So that's part 1 of implied intent. Here's part 2. If I am sending you on an operation or on a mission, and my implied intent is not valid for the situation, I better be damn sure to explicitly tell you that my implied intent, or I better make it perfectly clear what is happening. So if I'm always telling you, hey, you know what, Dave? If my implied intent is always, look, you know me, you know I'm aggressive, you know if we get in a firefight on the battlefield, we better take the fight to the enemy, take them out, destroy. That's what we do. We train like that. We go on workup. You've done 20, 25, 30 missions like that with that attitude. Now all of a sudden, we get put into a different AO, and we have a very sensitive politician that's there, and they've started to assemble some coalition supporting troops, and the last thing we want to do is cause collateral damage or have any kind of civilian casualties. When we're going out, before you go, I say, hey, Dave, here's what's going on. I know normally we are default aggressive. tonight, I actually want you to be default passive. I want the security and safety of the populace and the infrastructure to be the number one thing that you think about. That is infinitely more important tonight than closing with and destroying the enemy. So that's it. We have implied intent, and we better know what that implied intent is. And if you're going to go against that implied intent, you better make it explicitly clear.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think of how I have always been as a subordinate. When I have worked for other people throughout my career, one of the things I tried to discover very early on about my leadership is what that implied intent was. And that can be really, really strong. If I'm working for you, I know what your implied intent is. That is the strongest thing in my mind to guide my decisions for decentralized command. So if we're going to go out and do anything that's going to be different than implied intent, you got to almost go out of it and say, listen, I know what you would do in this situation, and I'm telling you why you're not going to do what you're not going to do and why, because that implied intent is, for me, like that is the most powerful force that I had as a subordinate leader is what would my boss want me to do here is making sure I understood that. So you saying you got to go out of your way to make it clear to do that rings very true with me, because as a subordinate, my leadership intent was something I sought to understood early on and really understand, because that allowed me to go do what I was supposed to do when they weren't around and do a good job.
Yeah, it's interesting. This has had no name before. I'm naming it now, implied intent. Now, this links very closely to the next point I want to bring up, which is, and I've been talking about this, but I just want to tie these two things together. It's decentralized command and culture. So decentralized command and culture, look, this is a very easy connection to make, and it's very similar to what we just said. You have implied intent, and then we have, from that implied intent, you start to develop a culture as an organization. And if our culture as an organization is default aggressive, then I know that you can make decisions based on that culture. So culture inside of an organization is like the highest form of decentralized command. And then you can marry that up with another word, culture and values. So if your culture and your values are strong, then people in your chain of command should be able to make 99% of decisions just knowing the culture and the values. You add some implied intent to that and it's 99.9%. You tell them why they're doing what they're doing and what the parameters are, they can make it. You don't never need to talk to them again. So just recognize that values and culture is the highest form of decentralized command. And if you haven't instilled values and culture into your team, and your team doesn't know what your implied intent is, and the thing is, this is the thing, like I've never used that word, but we've all seen it, right? But now, hopefully, people can become conscious about what. Imagine if you were working for freaking Chesty Puller. Like, you don't need to hear anything else. You don't need to be told anything. There needs to be no briefs. He doesn't need to say a word. The implied intent is there. We are going on. General Patton, same thing. What's the implied intent? Implied intent is we are not digging in. We are going forward.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing. So if you're not going to do that, you need to pull them back. But also, as a leader, think about what your implied intent is, and then take that implied intent, capture it, write it down, simplify it, and then distribute it. And guess what you have? You've got a culture, you've got values that create your culture, which then become the backbone of the decentralized command inside your organization.
The connection between culture and decentralized command, and as simple as you made that sound, and as I hear it, it's so clear what the connection is. The first time you said it when we were talking about it, I had not thought of it in those terms, though. So if you're listening, you're thinking about, hey, why am I creating values for my organization? Why am I describing what these things are? Decentralized command is what all the leaders want. Leaders want decentralized command. They know that's the end state they want to get to with their team, because they can't be everywhere. There's a million reasons why decentralized command is a goal. But if you don't really think about the connection from culture, that it's part of decentralized command, you can miss that in your mind. And when you're doing these exercises where you try to capture a company's vision and writing down the things that define the culture, if you're not making the connection to decentralized command, meaning you're not realizing that those things are what is going to allow your people to do what they should do when you're not around, you're going to miss something. And when you made the connection, it was still, even for me, a light bulb, like, wow, it's important to say that, like, why I'm doing this as an organizational leader. We're creating these things because I want you all to know what to do that is in the best interest of this team when I'm not there, and make that connection for your people.
You want me to take it one step further for you, Dave Berke?
Yes.
Check this out. When someone on your team does something that was wrong, that didn't make sense, that you can't understand why, all you have to do is start to deconstruct that decision, and you're going to get to a place where there's no guidance, where there's no values, where there's no understanding of the why. So when you see people in your organization that are doing the wrong thing, pull the string on that.
Yeah.
You're going to find out why. It's your fault because you haven't given them the implied intent. You haven't given them the commander's intent. You haven't given them the values and the culture that will drive them to make the right decisions. So how do you fix it? You start to put those things in place.
Yeah.
And as I stood there and was thinking through this, they were talking, and I said, let me say something here. If you don't agree with that plan, don't leave the tent.